Blake watched her through the gap in the curtain, his jaw clenched so tightly it ached. There she was, Avery, the woman who had shattered him in silence, bathed in studio lights, looking radiant in that blood-red dress, laughing nervously with the producer like she still owned the room. The cameras weren't rolling yet, but her performance had already begun. She thought today was a reconciliation, a redemption arc. What she didn't know was that Blake had rewritten the script. Forgiveness? No, this was televised revenge, dressed up in daytime empathy and studio applause. And as the floor manager called 30 seconds to air, Blake stepped forward, smiling wide for the show and for the trap. The red live indicator lit up in the top corner of the studio screen, and America leaned in with their cereal spoons. Blake and Avery sat shoulder to shoulder on the faux cozy couch, a sea of pastel mugs and stage plants around them. The host beamed, saying words like healing and second chances. Avery smiled softly, eyes glossy, voice shaking as she thanked everyone for giving them space to rebuild. Blake turned to her, nodding like a man overcome by love and patience. Inside, he catalogued each blink, each quiver in her voice. She had no idea the second segment, one she hadn't been briefed on, was titled The Full Story, Blake's Side. He didn't need her confession. He had something better, receipts. The moment hit like a punch through glass. 1 second, the host was transitioning to the next segment, a look back at Blake's truth, and the next, the massive screen behind them lit up with damning text messages. Screenshots, dates, names, blurred photos. Every lie Avery had fed him over the past year. Her business trips, the late meetings, the old friend, all paraded in 4K clarity behind her, like a digital betrayal crucifix. The audience gasped. A few even clapped before realizing it wasn't part of the script. Avery turned to Blake, horror blooming across her face, lips trembling. But Blake just stared ahead, voice calm, saying, "I wanted her to see what forgiveness looks like before the world saw the truth." And with that, the real show began. Avery sat paralyzed, eyes wide as the images looped again behind her, each one a nail in the coffin of her carefully managed public persona. She opened her mouth, but the words got stuck behind the lump of panic swelling in her throat. The host turned toward the camera, fumbling for a seed that wouldn't come. The studio lights felt hotter now, almost punitive. The live audience had stopped clapping. Even the floor manager looked frozen. Avery blinked rapidly, her carefully applied mascara beginning to betray her too. She looked at Blake, searching for something. Pity, forgiveness, a way out. But all he gave her was a polished smile, the kind people wear at funerals when they're finally free. In the control room, panic spread like spilled coffee over the mixing boards. Producers hovered around monitors, eyes flicking between split screens. Blake's calm confession, Avery's unraveling face, the crowd's ripple of shock. One tech whispered, "Do we cut?" while the executive producer held up a trembling hand. This wasn't a disaster. It was ratings gold. The director, beads of sweat glistening on his forehead, leaned into the mic and said, "Stay with it, don't cut unless she walks off." This was what live television was made for. Real-time betrayal, beautifully lit, tragically authentic. The kind of chaos that trends within minutes. And as the host tried to salvage decorum, the show officially left its script and became legend. Blake leaned forward, elbows on his knees, voice calm and razor sharp. "I loved her," he said, facing the camera like it was a long-lost friend. "I forgave her. I begged her to be honest." She smiled and lied again. Avery's head turned sharply toward him, the red of her dress almost vibrating under the lights. She reached for his arm, whispering something off mic, but Blake didn't even glance her way. He kept talking about betrayal, about shame, about the mask people wear when the camera isn't rolling. The audience was silent now, caught in the tension of a man peeling back civility to reveal something colder, control. Blake wasn't speaking to Avery anymore. He was speaking to every viewer who ever wondered if justice could be choreographed. Turns out it could. Avery's hand tightened around the cue card, crumpling the soft edges until they bit into her palm. The studio clock ticked behind her, counting down to the next break. 90 seconds of salvation if she could just survive until then. Her voice had abandoned her. The card in her lap read, Segment 3, The Road to Rebuilding. Ironic, considering her credibility had just collapsed on national television. She could hear whispers in the crowd, a few stifled coughs. Every eye in the room was either pitying her or feeding on her humiliation. And beside her, Blake sat perfectly still, a statue carved from vengeance. This wasn't just a betrayal, it was execution with a smile. The studio exploded into movement as the commercial jingle faded in. Crew members swarmed like bees, one grabbing the host notes, another adjusting the lighting rig. Avery stood shakily, her heels clicking against the stage like tiny betrayals of balance. A makeup assistant approached her with wide eyes and a trembling brush. She waved her off. The host, still mid-conversation with the control booth, avoided eye contact. One producer leaned in close, whispering that she could exit discreetly if needed. But Avery didn't move toward the exit. Instead, she walked off stage with stiff dignity, like a dethroned queen refusing to bow. They hadn't scripted this, but she wasn't about to let it end in silence. Blake returned to the couch alone, the host rejoining him with a forced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The audience applauded on cue, but the energy was fractured, uncertain. Blake lifted the show's mug to his lips, taking a slow, deliberate sip like nothing had happened. The lights bore down harder now, spotlights of judgment and admiration, depending on the lens. The host murmured something about courage and telling your truth, but Blake barely heard her. He had already won. The country would see it as justice, maybe even heroism. What they wouldn't see, what they'd never know, was that this wasn't revenge for one betrayal. It was punishment for all of them. Avery was just the one who stepped into the frame. Avery leaned against the cool hallway wall, her breath shallow, the weight of the cameras finally lifted, but the shame still clinging to her skin. A small mirror hung beside the exit door, scratched and forgotten. She caught her reflection and flinched. The red dress, once stunning under studio lights, now looked like something she'd been caught wearing, not chosen. Her mascara trailed down her face in two perfect lines, like quotation marks around a humiliation she hadn't agreed to. The hallway was silent, the kind of silence only found after applause dies. She wanted to scream, to rewrite what just happened, but the broadcast was already out there. The world had seen it, and no red dress could outshine that kind of truth. Behind the glittering facade of the network's polished set, deals were already being struck. A production assistant, no older than 22, slid a flash drive into the palm of a waiting journalist outside the studio's back exit. The files held everything: full footage, behind-the-scenes audio, unused B-roll, exclusive angles, raw emotion. No watermarks, the assistant muttered. The journalist nodded, already texting. Somewhere inside, Avery was still wiping her face, and Blake was sipping water under makeup touch-up. But out here, the next act had already begun. Ratings were just the opening bid. Now it was about narrative, ownership, control, and Avery, for all her screen time, no longer had any say in how the story was told. Blake sat alone now, the energy drained, tie loosened, eyes a little less sharp in the quiet of the dressing room. The applause from the last segment echoed faintly through the walls, muted, like clapping for a ghost. He stared at himself in the mirror, not the man the audience saw, but the one who had orchestrated a takedown so perfect it felt scripted. There was satisfaction, but also something hollower than expected. He picked up his phone. 5 missed calls from unknown numbers. Probably networks, or sponsors, or vultures. He smirked anyway. He hadn't just won back his dignity, he'd monetized it. But behind the smirk, in the mirror's honest glow, there was something else. Even puppeteers feel the strings they pull. Wine Sao. The internet devoured the clip like a feast. A frozen frame of Avery, eyes wide, mouth parted in shock, became the thumbnail for every upload. Hashtags trended within hours. #live betrayal, #talk show trap, #red dress reckoning. People didn't care about context. They cared about spectacle. The truth didn't matter as much as the angle. Her tears became memes. Blake's cold delivery became sound bites. Reels, remixes, reaction videos. Every corner of the digital world echoed with the sound of their public collapse. Avery's voice was drowned beneath comment threads of strangers who now claimed to know her soul. And Blake, he watched it all unfold from a safe distance, liking only the cleverest captions. He didn't need to say anything else. The world was doing the PR for him. Avery sat at her sister's kitchen table, hoodie sleeves pulled over her hands, staring at the looping footage on her laptop. She watched herself get ruined in real time, again and again. She didn't blink, didn't cry. Not anymore. The tears had come in waves that first night, but now they were just salt stains on memory. On screen, her face twisted in horror while Blake stayed composed, articulate, clean. The world had chosen its protagonist, and she had become an anecdote. Her phone buzzed with interview offers, podcasts, apology tours. But every message felt like a door she didn't want to open. How do you explain your own betrayal when someone else's revenge is already the headline? Blake slid the pen across the table, his signature already scrawled in confident ink. Around him, the network execs clapped politely, their smiles just tight enough to signal opportunity. The talk show logo blinked on a massive wall screen behind them. Clean, corporate, forgettable. But Blake? He wasn't forgettable anymore. The contract guaranteed him a guest host spot and a development deal. They called it authentic storytelling. He called it poetic justice. He'd turned heartbreak into exposure, and exposure into elevation. No one cared who got crushed beneath the climb, as long as the climb made headlines. Blake leaned back in his chair, the check already in his jacket pocket, and thought, revenge tastes sweeter with syndication rights. The sidewalk was slick from a light drizzle as Avery stood across from the glass storefront, staring into the well-lit display. There, stacked in neat columns, was Blake's face on every cover. His memoir, The Forgiveness Frame. The irony hit like cold wind. A marketing intern adjusted the books cheerfully, unaware of the woman watching outside, her red umbrella folded at her side, her reflection half visible beside his grinning face. Avery's breath fogged the glass. This wasn't just a book. It was a rewrite of everything, her story, her fall, her silence. She could have walked in, could have bought a copy. Instead, she turned away, her heels echoing on the wet pavement. He got the last word. But she still held the truth. On a mounted screen above the bar, Blake flashed his signature smirk, hands folded coolly in his lap, as the late-night host played a clip from The Moment. The audience erupted in laughter and gasps again. The host called it iconic. Blake nodded humbly, tossing in a line about truth always winning. The bartender didn't laugh. He just wiped down the same glass twice, eyes darting to a woman seated alone at the end of the bar. She wasn't watching. She was facing the other way, swirling her drink. The sound of applause filled the room anyway. On screen, Blake grinned. Off screen, the world kept spinning. And for everyone who didn't know the full story, it was enough. The studio was dark now. Silent. The applause long gone, the cameras powered down. Two chairs faced each other under the ghostly hum of resting lights. On one armrest, carefully folded, lay a red dress, left behind like a relic of something intimate and brutal. No one claimed it. No one noticed it missing. It had been part of a moment, and now it was part of a memory. The dress didn't speak. It didn't confess. It simply existed, proof that something real had happened here once, beneath all the edits and applause. And as